Um, I had gone to these very prestigious universities, Cornell University, and then to University of California, Berkeley, for a PhD in urban planning. And I had gotten a National Science Foundation research fellowship. And so I was on my way to getting a PhD, and then later on working at a major university as a professor. But my ex-wife had a lupus, and she became very, very ill, and they had to do brain surgery on her. And so I had to quit writing my dissertation. I had two small children. Her sister was living with us. She was a high school student, and her mother had just recently retired, and her Social Security was minimal. So I had to take two full-time jobs. So if not, I would have been a recently retired academic professor somewhere in the US. So fast forward about 20 years after that, I went to law school and I graduated as an attorney. And then I worked for over 25 years as a federal tax attorney with the Department of Treasury. And so here I was, an atheist, rationalist, materialist. I had zero interest in any of the topics that are being discussed here tonight. I thought everyone here was crazy. And then one day in March of 2012, we had a Jack Russell Terrier that was 15 years old, and she was quite ill. And we knew that she didn't have much time here on this earthly plane. And then one evening, she became paralyzed, totally paralyzed. We called our veterinarian, as a good friend of ours, Dr. Phil Cruz. And he told me from what you described that she had a stroke, a cerebral hemorrhage. And he says, look, I'll open up my office tomorrow. He wasn't scheduled to work tomorrow, so we can euthanize her. And so my wife, being the good, hardcore Mexican Catholic that she was praying all night. And me being the good, hardcore atheist that I said, pray all you want, nothing is going to happen. And so that morning, when we woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, the dog was still paralyzed. So I went back to sleep, and my wife carried her down the stairs to go outside and see if she can go to the bathroom, because we didn't know. And so when my wife got downstairs, she saw this object in our living room. And I'll describe it to you. It was sort of semi-metallic, like an upside down letter U, about 3 feet in height and 2 feet in width. Just picture the U, and it was upside down. And it was silverish metallic, but it was phasing in and out of reality. Like you could see it now, and then it wasn't there. And then it was, you could see sort of like the outlines of it, but you could see the couch, our couch, right behind it, sort of like see-through. And so she then was calling me, and I totally ignored her. So then she goes upstairs, she pulls me out of bed, and when I go downstairs with her, she's walking in front of me. She wouldn't tell me what it was. And then all of a sudden, she disappears. The dog disappears that was on the floor. And then my head turned to the left, and there I saw this energy being. And let me describe it. It was roughly 2.5 feet in width, about 1.5 feet in height. And it was multiple colors, like pure energy, flickering and waving, transparent. You could see the couch right behind it. And it appeared in the same location of the object that my wife later described to me. And what I'm about to tell you sounds a little bit strange to any normal person, but I didn't care that my wife disappeared. I didn't care that I was watching this object. Whatever this object was totally controlled my mind. I looked at it, I waved at it, and I said, this is BS. This is what you got me up for? I'm going back to sleep, which is not normal, okay? So then I walked up upstairs to my bed. I went to bed, I put my hands on my chest, and I was immediately knocked out. And then an hour later, when I woke up, I was not fully conscious. I wasn't in that hypnotic trance that I was in. So I ran downstairs. And then my wife, poof, she reappears again. She looks down, and the dog is running around the entire living room. And my wife was like, the angels killed her, the angels killed her, the angels killed her. And to me, for the first time in my life, I was speechless. I was like I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then after I recovered, I asked her, I said, where were you? Where were you? Look at the time, it's 7 o'clock. You know, we got up at 6 o'clock. Where were you all this time? I didn't go anywhere. I was here the whole time. She had something what is called missing time, which is very common in the UFO contact field, but I had no idea of these things. And then we tried to exchange stories, but I didn't see what she saw. She didn't see what I saw. It was total chaos. And then she drew eventually later on what she saw. I drew what I saw, and they were two different things. And to her, she had not gone anywhere. She had no, she said the clock was wrong. Okay, for that 1 hour that she was gone. So then let me fast forward. I then began to go to YouTube and on the internet, and it was every night, every day, looking up paranormal this, paranormal that, because I had no idea it was anything else. So then one evening, the dog woke her up at 3:30, and she said, "Oh, maybe she wants to go to the bathroom." Now the dog was like a puppy, not physically. Physically, it looked like how she was before, but in terms of her hyperactivity, completely healthy. Our dog had a miraculous medical healing. Okay, and that's what it was. You can't call it anything else. A miraculous medical healing. And then and she went from being put to sleep to like a dog that had the energy of a puppy. And then at 3:30, that was about a month and a half later, my wife goes outside, and she hears this loud noise, and that lasted for about a minute, and then the noise dissipated, and then she looks up, and there was a big gigantic UFO right above her, huge. It was like several football fields in height, and at the edges had colored edges. It was like cylinder, a long cylinder. And then the way she tells me that morning was, my angels came and visited me last night. I said, angels? What are you talking about? Was it, did it have wings? Was it in the living room or anything? No, it was outside. It was huge. And I described it, and she described it for me. You didn't see angels. You saw a UFO. She goes, oh, you're an atheist. You wouldn't understand, you know. And then now she was right, that these were non-human intelligence that had the power, the abilities of a modern angel. And let me describe that to you. So she described it in detail, what happened, what occurred. And then about 3 months later, she was in Mexico for an entire month, and she began to pray outside, and these UFOs would appear. Okay. And then several times, family members were witnesses. And later on, I spoke to them, and they said the exact same thing that my wife said. So she was calling down these objects. She was praying, and they would appear to her. And one time it was seen by like half the city of Veracruz, Mexico. There was videos taken, there were pictures taken, and it was in the news, the 11 o'clock news. That was because at 9 o'clock, she started to pray outside. And after a half an hour, she stopped because she didn't see anything. What she didn't know was her sister was telling her, to come here to the TV. It was on the 11 o'clock news. Videos, pictures, witness testimony, things of that sort. They had stopped Veracruz Airport for an hour because this object was flying close by the airport. And so then when she came home, I decided to call down a UFO just like she had done. I was waiting for a friend of mine. I won't give you all the details, but basically while I was waiting for him, just to kill time, I started to call down the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena. And I didn't pray because I normally don't do that. And as time went on, I became much more loving, much more sincere. And within 15 minutes, I said, what a jerk. I'm going crazy, calling down a UFO. I need to stop immediately. And then once I stopped, when I said that in my mind, this huge object appeared in front of me. And let me describe it to you. Maybe I could show you a picture, a drawing that someone drew of it. Maybe well, I won't do it. I'll describe it because I'll make it very informal. It was oblong, which is long, rectangular shaped. It was hundreds of these oblong streaks of light that were more like 6 football fields of these long streaks of light. And there were hundreds of them that formed all these circle shapes that were moving around. And it was like 3 different types of circular shapes. It was basically light configurations. So then my friend comes with his wife and their 17-year-old daughter. Now, in the meantime, my daughter, I heard my daughter's voice. Daddy, you and mommy have seen UFOs. Next time you see a UFO, you call me, Daddy. Don't forget. I had never said that to my daughter. Okay. And I thought she was next to me. I turned around. She wasn't there. I later realized that it was a telepathic communication. You think that that person is right there, but no, they're not, because you hear it inside your mind. And so I said, oh, she wants to see this. She wants to see this. So I go to the window. I start yelling for her. And what is it, Daddy? I said, sweetheart, run outside. There's a UFO out here. Okay, the UFO run. So she runs outside. So it's just she and I. And we were watching this object for like 20 minutes. And then when my friend comes, he and his wife immediately start to try to explain it away what they were watching. They go, Ray, what is this? What is this? I said, you know damn well what it is. No, it can't be. It can't be. And they were trying to explain it away. After about a minute of them trying to explain it away, I busted out laughing because I didn't want to tell them that I called it down because that would have been too much information for them to digest. And so I started laughing, and then with my mind, and I don't know why I did this. It seemed like I had communicated with this intelligence all my life, because with my mind, and this is literally exactly what I said. I said, you better come up with some better bullshit than this, because my friends don't believe you. And I have no idea why I said that, okay? But I said it. And then immediately what we were watching totally disappeared, completely wiped from the sky. And what replaced it immediately were like 50 huge orbs. They were like Volkswagen cars. They were all white, and they were blinking on and off, on and off. All the 50 different orbs, on and off like this, okay? And then they would take turns getting big and then getting small. Then another orb would get big and get smaller. So right then and there, my friends stopped trying to explain it away because they knew that this is not man-made, okay? And then after like 15 minutes, my friends left. They said, oh, we got business to take care. We got our work. We have to prepare for tomorrow's work, And then I don't even care, Now you think about it, you say, my goodness, you're watching a once in a lifetime experience and you got to prepare for your work tomorrow. That's not logical, I would have stayed there until the elephants were stomping on top of me, I would have not left. But that's how you think under these conditions, because they have the ability to control your mind, your emotions, your way of thinking, this intelligence. So here they left. My daughter and I were now watching this. So we watched it for another 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden, I felt like the mosquitoes were attacking me, hundreds of mosquitoes. So after like a minute, I couldn't take anymore. So I grabbed my daughter's hand and I go, come on, Xcaret, these mosquitoes are killing me. We got to go inside. And so when we go over there, I'm telling my ex-wife what had happened. And my daughter looks up to me and I said, we had to go inside because these mosquitoes were attacking me. And so my daughter looks up to me, she said, Daddy, there were no mosquitoes outside. And when she said that, it's like the hypnotist snapped his finger and I woke up. and I was like fully conscious now. I realized that I was in some type of hypnotic trance. And then I ran downstairs, I grabbed my camera, my video recorder to try to capture this thing, right? But no, it was gone, completely gone. Now, what did I learn from that particular experience? What I learned was that, well, first of all, this intelligence that I was dealing with was able to tap into your mind. With my daughter, it was able to tap in to like Akashic records of my daughter's conversations. Okay. And it was able to grab all that information and put sentences together and put it in my mind in a telepathic format. Okay, sounds crazy, but that's what happened. And then it was able to listen to me requesting to see it. And with 15 minutes, they appeared after me. This thing is called CE5 in the UFO community. Lots of people are documented and filmed doing this. So this is not a rare event. It actually this was first discussed on a regular basis that people were doing this back in 1976 in Peru with this man named Sixto Paz and his brother. And so since then, lots of people in different communities all around the world are calling down these UFOs, and they don't appear to everyone. It usually appears to people who have had, like this group, that have had contact with non-human intelligence, either through an NDE, out-of-body experiences. They've seen ghosts or spirits, things like that. That's how these things work. And so, so I realized that I can communicate with this intelligence. Again, at that time, I had no idea what it was. I thought it was a UFO back then, not now. And then in 15 minutes, they appear. I realized that what I was watching was a holographic projection. It was not an actual real object. It wasn't what people perceive a real UFO. No, it was a projection into my consciousness of those lights. Because immediately I said, you better come up with some better bullshit than this. That thing was totally replaced by a totally different types of light scenario. So that means what I was watching was not real. It was a projection, was taken away, and something different was put in front of me. And then this is not something that I realized immediately. It's just it's going over the experience over and over again. Okay. And then you learn to decipher it. Now, the next major experience that happened after that was that night. I went to YouTube, and because I couldn't go to sleep. And then I, was on YouTube playing around, and I saw my very first video on near-death experiences. I'd never knew what an NDE was. And it was this woman that was talking about her NDE, and I was totally captivated. The whole night I spent watching NDE videos, okay? I was fascinated by this. And I had not made any connection between NDEs and the UFO phenomenon. That came much later on. But the next day, what I did is I ordered 20 used books on NDEs. And I started reading them 4 hours a day. Then eventually it was 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. And where they were a couple of books left, I would order 20 more. Now, these were used books, obviously. And I became an NDE expert. And I never spoke to anyone about my interest in NDEs. Not only my ex-wife knew about it. And she had threatened to leave me because I was a crazy madman. Because that's all I was doing, reading these NDE books and consciousness studies books. And so then one day, 3 days in a row, all of my experiences seemed to happen in groups of threes. Okay? The very first three people I ever mentioned NDEs to. This was Friday, December 21st. Saturday, December 22nd. Sunday, December 23rd, 2012. Okay. And then someone told me, do you know what December 21st, 2012 is? I said, no. Well, that's the Mayan calendar. Okay. And I still don't know too much about that, but it's this philosophy that every 25,000 years, the universe goes into a different cycle. I don't know too much of the details of it, but that's all I know. But they mentioned that that was very important back in December 21st, 2012. So anyway, that was the first day. The first day, my daughter had a low-grade fever. I brought her to the doctor, pediatrician, who happens to be from Colombia. And then she said, well, I got some good news. We checked her ear, nose, and throat. We don't see any signs of infection. The fever that she had is gone. So to me, she maybe is a virus, a 24-hour virus. And then all of a sudden, I got this urge to tell this medical doctor about near-death experiences. And the very first person, and the way it came out was like a robotic voice out of my body. And this robotic voice said, excuse me, doctor, have you ever heard the term near-death experiences? I've just finished reading approximately 300 books on this topic, and it's a phenomenon that you need to know about, okay? So in my mind, I was like, I'm going crazy. I have a split personality. I have another person inside of me. What's going on? I need to go to a psychiatrist because, you know, why did this happen? And so the doctor's eyeballs had popped out. And I said, oh my God, now this woman thinks I'm crazy. And so I looked at her. I said, excuse me, doctor, I apologize. I don't know why I said that. And she said, there's no need to apologize. How did you know I had one? And I was like blown away. And then she went and she closed the door. And this is the longest doctor visit on record. Like 20 minutes we were with her. And she started telling me about her near-death experience, which occurred when she was 8 years old. And I won't give you all the details, but it was very powerful. And my daughter was right next to me. Okay. So I think this is orchestrated for my daughter as well, because she saw that huge UFO with me. She had this experience with the medical doctor. And then like a few years later, when she asked for some funds to fix up her room, because she wasn't a kid anymore, she was a teenager. When she was 13, she ordered like a salt lamp, a Vedic mandala, crystals. You know, she was like a love and light child, you know. And she was only 13 years old because she was having these experiences. So anyway, fast forward. That was on a Friday. The next day, on Sunday, it was a dinner at the local Catholic church, but it wasn't a religious ceremony. It was just to get all the people to attend the Spanish Mass. Okay, it was a social dinner. And so my wife sat next to this lady from Mexico, and I met her husband for the first time. And he's also Cuban American, like I am. He was born in Cuba, but raised in the US. And we introduced each other, and then all of a sudden, excuse me, Max, have you ever heard the term near-death experiences? I've just finished reading approximately 300 books on this topic, and it's a phenomenon that you need to know about. And so in my mind was, I am going crazy. Why did this voice come out of my mouth, you know? And it's like 2 days in a row. And so Max was like with his eyes wide open. And I said, oh my God, Max, I apologize, man. I don't know why I said that. He says, Ray, I've never told this to anyone. And then he starts telling me of the near-death experience of his mother that died in his arms. When she came back, she described the paramedic. She described what he told her while he was giving her CPR. She described that she had died. She had gone to heaven, met her deceased husband, and the details of that conversation, you know, the whole works. Max was telling me. And still, I didn't make the connection of those 3 months of reading 300 books on near-death experiences with what was happening, what happened on Friday, what happened on Saturday, right? So on Sunday, every Sunday, I would go to my parents' house. And, you know, they were elderly. And my father was very ill. He would die like 2 years later. And he was sort of like the Archie Bunker of Cubans, you know? And it was goddamn this, goddamn that, you know? And so I said, I've only seen my father twice at church. He's going to die soon, but he's going to die, you know, fearing death, you know, the whole works. He's a total atheist. And I said, I need to tell him what happened the last 2 days. So I told my mother, I said, Mom, help me get my dad dressed because I have something very, very important to tell both of you. And so we sat down in the porch outside in the backyard, and I told him what happened on Friday with the medical doctor and what happened yesterday with this man at church, right? So my father then responds and he goes, "Ah, that happened to me." And I was like, "What?" You know, and then he told me the most profound NDE of any NDE story I've ever heard. He said, and I'll be very, very brief. He said he was up there 20 to 30 years. What do you mean 20 or 30 years? Well, that's how long it took God to show me all the good things I had done and all the bad things I had done. And that lasted 20 to 30 years. He had a life review that to him lasted 20 to 30 years. And then, he described me, there's no such thing as the devil. God is all loving, I don't fear of dying. I know what awaits me. He had met his father and his mother and his deceased brother, that there's no such thing as the devil, and he just went on and on. And then I started asking him lots of questions, and he just clammed up. He didn't want to talk anymore about it. But Dad, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to talk about it. I told you, I don't want to talk about it, so I had to cut the conversations. So then I talked to my mother. I said, "Mom, did he ever tell you about this before?" She said, "We only spoke about it once, and that was when he was waking up from the emergency room." Okay. And I was like, "Go back to sleep, go back to sleep. It's the anesthesia. Go back to sleep." No, I need to tell you. Go back, go. No, I need to tell you that, damn it. Because he had been gone for 20 or 30 years, and all of a sudden he's back into this reality. And then he told my mother exactly what he had just told me. And then going home that evening, I saw some stars in the sky, and I talked to God for the first time. And I said, "God, I want to thank you, because in a 3-month time period, you managed to totally transform an atheist, materialist, rationalist into someone that I don't believe. I know I am an eternal spiritual being. And I have that knowingness more than any Catholic priest in Miami. So thank you." And since that day, I talk to God, okay? And all these weird paranormal experiences have happened to me. So maybe I could take a break now and people could ask me questions, and I could go on to the next major experience. But that's how I became spiritual.
So if anybody has any questions, why don't you use the little hand raise icon at the bottom, because that'll put you up there where we can see you. Anybody have a question?
Okay, if no questions, I could continue.
Great, continue.
Okay.
Like your
All right.
stories.
Now, and then what happened was that over the next 4 years, whenever I met a major contact experiencer, I would get this knowingness that just overcame my mind, my body. I had physical sensations when I would be near them, okay? And let me explain the first one. And this would happen on a weekly basis. And then after 4 years, it sort of tapered down. But let me explain the very first experience. My daughter was invited to a University of Miami boat that was chartered to tag sharks. Okay. And my daughter was, I guess at that time, she was 10 and a half years old. And though, so there was a whole bunch of kids, like 10 little kids that were 10 years old, and a whole bunch of students from the University of Miami. They had a professor, and then they had the people that manned the boat. I didn't see them. They were in a different part. And this is a nice sized boat. So I sat next to this young college student, and all of a sudden I got this strong sensation that overcame my entire body and my body. It was like this knowingness that she's had a major contact experience. And so I sat down next to her. I said, "Have you seen UFOs?" And she said, "No." I said, "Well, do you want to hear my UFO experience?" And I told her that first experience, right? And then she then tells me, but she said, can we go to the corner, the corner of the boat where no one else was at? And she tells me of an experience that her mother had picked her up in Miami. Miami is in the southwest part of Florida. So she lived in the southeastern part of Florida. So she lived in the southwestern part, in the city called Naples, a very beautiful city. And so they had a highway that cuts through the Florida Everglades, Highway 75. And this is in the evening, so very few cars at that time period. And so her mother was doing whatever, 65, and all of a sudden, this huge, gigantic fireball comes from the sky. She said it was like the size of a car, sort of like what I had described earlier, the size of a Volkswagen, but this one was orange, like the sun, descended quickly from the sky and attached itself to the side window, the passenger side window, like right next to it. And she started screaming. She jumped on her mother, and then her mother started screaming, and then the mother gunned it, 95 miles per hour on the highway. And she told me that this object was attached to her car for like about a half an hour. And that's a very long time. And it takes about an hour and a half to get from one side of Florida to the other half. So needless to say, they were scared to death. And then she told me that experience. I said, who else have you told? She said, no one else except her mother and herself know about this. I said, do you have brothers or sisters? She said, yeah, I have 2 brothers. Have you told them? No. Have you told your father? No. Okay. So that's pretty common for a lot of these people who have these paranormal experiences. They keep quiet because of fear and ridicule. And so then this experience happened again, like 2 weeks later, when a locksmith was in my house. And again, this powerful feeling, but now I understood it because it was the same sensation. Okay. And I said, well, let me ask this guy a paranormal question, because it was very, very powerful, the sensation. And then before you know it, he was talking about that he sees dead people all the time. Okay. He even told me the story that he and all of his friends, when they were children, they saw a unicorn. Okay. They live right next to this farm, and this the farm had all dark colored horses. All of a sudden, this completely white colored horse came up to them and had a horn. I said, oh, someone put a fake horn on it. I said, he said, no, it came right up to us. It let us touch the horn. It was like a rock. Okay. And I smiled, not because I doubted him, because I was thinking, okay, here we go again, with another person with a crazy story. And then he called, you don't believe me, huh? And he called his brother. And his brother, I don't want to talk about it again. I don't want to talk about it again. Brother, you owe me one. You owe me one. And then the brother said, okay. And then he repeated that story of the unicorn. Okay. And basically what it was is that they were with a group of children, 7 or 8 children, and they all witnessed this unicorn. And the unicorn let it touch its horn. So anyway, this man was seeing ghosts and spirits all the time. And now, because the experience was replicated, I knew and I understood what that sensation was. And what it was that someone that you're close to has had a major paranormal experience. So that occurred for like at least 4 years, major experiences. And the last 2 experiences that occurred, one was I was at a barbershop, and because it had been many, many months since that occurred. But this time it was 2 people that had these experiences. And it was very, very powerful because now it was 2 people right next to each other. And I won't go over the details of that, but basically these 2 barbers were competing to tell me stories of paranormal experiences. One person lived in a poltergeist house. Another person saw a shadow being, and other paranormal experiences. Another time was these 2 phlebotomists, these 2 ladies that were taking my blood out. I entered into the hospital, and I saw this woman. She had tattoos all over her. And I said, oh, all of a sudden, she had a hard life, difficult life. And that resulted in paranormal experiences, because I was getting this strong vibe from her. You know, I immediately recognized it, what it was. So then I started telling you her, and by then I was like zeroing point blank for each person what it was. I said, have you had a near-death experience? Okay, that's not something that you commonly tell people, okay? And then, but by then I knew what it might be, okay? Not 100% of the time, but very, very close. So he goes, how did you know that? I said, did you die and your spirit went out of your body and you saw your body underneath that? How did you know that? And I said, did you then enter a tunnel? You know, and I described how do you know all these things, you know, of what happened to me? And then she eventually tells me all the stories. She had a near-death experience. So after she finished that, I said, a lot of people that have near-death experiences, they also afterwards have paranormal experiences. Did you begin to have paranormal experiences afterwards? She goes again, how did you know these things? You know, can you read my mind? I said, no, this is a pattern of people who've had these NDEs. And then she began to tell me of paranormal experiences. So the other lady, who's an elderly lady, who was actually taking my blood out, she was listening to all this. And she said, my husband had a near-death experience. And then she explained her husband's NDEs. And then, and I said, have you ever had any paranormal experience? Well, I saw my deceased mother 2 days after she was buried in my living room, okay? And so that's why this is so strong, because it was two people that were close together that had this, just like the barbers. And usually I don't get those now, maybe twice a year. Okay, but because that was two people in close proximity to each other, then it was real strong again. I sensed that sensation. So I began to have that for, well, very strongly for 4 years. Now, let me tell you about my next major experience. And this is a doozy. This occurred in May of 2013. In May of 2013, I had met this medical doctor at the probate courthouse in Miami. And I recognized his aunt, and we shook hands. And when I shook his hand, it was like you putting your hand in a 220-volt socket. My whole hair stood up. And this is, I already now was accustomed to that experience. It's been already 6 months of me, no, 4 months of me having these experiences on a weekly basis. And so I immediately recognized it. And I said, oh my God, this guy's a major contact experiencer. But I stayed quiet, you know? And so he was there, he was writing 3 appellate court briefs for his aunt in the field of wills, trusts, and estates. Now that was my specialty in the IRS, wills, trusts, and estates. And so I felt sorry for the guy. And so I said, look, here's my business card. Send me the drafts of the 3 appellate court briefs. I'll take a look at it. I'll make the corrections. And like that, you could send it to the appellate court in Florida. So he had 2 weeks to do this thing. And these appellate court briefs, the maximum number of pages that you can write is 150 pages. So 1 week later, he sends me 3 appellate court briefs, each of them 150 pages, that not even a Harvard Law School professor could have written. Okay. When I read that, I was like in total shock. I certainly could not have written that. And this is a medical doctor. But then his aunt had told me beforehand that this man was brilliant. They tested his IQ. They could never measure his IQ. It was way beyond what anyone had ever recorded. And so once I read that, I said, I got you. Bingo. I know you're a special person, right? So I sent him my diary of my experiences, which I'd never sent to anyone, okay? So I sent him my diary, the entire diary. Before I would send like certain comments of my experiences, just like a couple of other people, but him, I sent him the whole thing. And so he responds back, he says, Dear Ray, you know the profession that I have. I cannot respond to you via email or by voicemail. I have to stay quiet. He was an emergency room physician. And so he says, I'll be in Miami in about 3 months, then I'll touch back to you. Okay. Well, it was the next day or 2 days later afterwards, I was driving my car to go to work in this major highway next to Miami Airport. All of us, and I'm listening to an interview on public radio station about this man who was doing art fat with his liposuction. Okay, and it was like, I was like fascinated. This is unbelievable. And I'm listening to this thing, and all of a sudden, I'm not in my body anymore. I'm not in the car. Everything was all dark around me, and I couldn't see anything. And then little by little, I see images. And then I realized I am inside a huge cart. If you could think of sort of like a Ferris wheel, and you're inside the middle of it, except this didn't have as many spokes. It had maybe 10 spokes. And then a movie starts to develop inside each of the spokes. Okay. And I'm getting these telepathic downloads about what each of the spokes is all about. And what they turned out to be is a different contact modalities. And let me explain what a contact modality is. This is a term that I coined in 2013, in November of 2013, when I wrote an article titled The Quantum Hologram Theory of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities. Now, the contact modalities are all the different ways that humans are piercing the veil of our physical reality and are having contact with non-human intelligence. Okay. So in one of the spokes, I saw near-death experiences. Then I was getting downloads of what is an NDE. In another one, I saw out-of-body experiences. And I was getting downloads of what is an out-of-body experiences. And then another one, it was astro-travel experiences. And I was getting downloads that, look, it is very similar, but very different. Because out-of-body experience, you're interacting with your physical reality. But with an astral travel experiences, you're interacting now with higher planes of consciousness. And very, very detailed information that it is a dimensions where you're manifesting reality. Okay, like this man, Preston Dennett, a friend of mine, he had his first out-of-body experience, and he would get scared for like the first 20 or 30 times. Then he managed to control that. Then he began to have astral travel experience, where he's going to other dimensions. Before, he was just interacting with Earth, with his room, the neighborhood, the area, that sort of thing. So it was still physical. It was his consciousness that was interacting with the physicality. With an astral travel experience, is that you're going into other dimensions. And it's a dimension where you can manifest things. Just like a near-death experience. With a near-death experience, you're looking at someone at a group of people. And then you think to yourself, oh, I wonder who these people could be. All of a sudden, boom, you're right there with these other people. Okay, whatever you think, it's like you manifesting it. Same thing with an astral travel experience. So when this happened to him, he says, I want to see my mother. I want to see my mother, his deceased mother. Boom, here is his deceased mother, okay, in a non-physical form. And they're both interacting. He said that they went to a river, a shallow river, and they were splashing water on each other. Okay, his mother was dead, and here he was astral travel. And so that's just to give you an example of an astral travel experience. So it's everything in the kitchen sink. It's thousands of different types of for that person, it was Edgar Mitchell back in the early 90s, wrote physics papers on the quantum hologram theory of consciousness. Nassim Haramein just piggybacked on it many years later, but it was Edgar Mitchell. And we have a copy of two of Edgar's major papers in our website, which I'll discuss later on. So if you're interested in that, that was a comment on the chat room. So anyway, here I was getting images of remote viewing, of channeling, seeing ghosts, spirits, remote viewing, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, UFOs, all the different paranormal. And then I was getting additional information, like what do they have in common? What they have in common is that all of them involves a manipulation of space-time. And because there's a manipulation of space-time, by definition, these are consciousness-based phenomena. Okay, these are not physical phenomena, these are consciousness-based. And it went into detail, some science and physics stuff, which I don't understand, and I still don't understand, okay? And so that seemed to last maybe a couple of hours. But then I was returned, I was given this mission. You need to inform humanity of the relationship between us, the spirit world, and consciousness. Okay, now while all of this was happening, I had no idea what the hell this meant. Okay, and so us is the intelligence behind the phenomenon, and that is the mind of God with us as individuated units of consciousness, because we're all the same. We are God. God is us. Okay, and the spirit world is what happens to our physical body when we pass over. Okay, and consciousness, I was told, was the fabric of our reality. Consciousness is everything. It's the whole, platform for how all of this takes place. And then I was put back in. It says you need assistance, and you need to get people that have minimal ego. And once it said minimal ego, boom, I was put back in my body in the middle of a traffic jam. No time had elapsed. I was still listening to this interview of the National Public Radio station of this documentary on liposuction and art fat. Not 1 second was skipped. And I was after that, I was like, I had to pull over. I was like, what the hell was this all about? And then I got to work, and I couldn't do any work. After like 3 or 4 hours, I went back home because my mind was not into work. And so when I got home, and a couple hours later, when I checked my emails, I got an email from Mary Rodwell, and she's one of the world's major UFO contact experiencer researchers. Let me give you a background for that. 6 months before, in October, I was having so many different experiences that I thought I was going crazy. So I sent to a lot of major names in the UFO field excerpts from my diary, not the whole thing, just excerpts. And so almost nobody contacted me except this man named Whitley Strieber and this man named Grant Cameron. And two of them happen to be people who have researched the UFO phenomena, but focus on consciousness, okay? Especially recently with Whitley Strieber. And that's it. So then he was Mary Rodwell saying, look, Ray, I'm responding late to your email that was sent 6 months ago, but it was just posted on my computer today. So it appeared that this thing was held up in cyberspace. So if anyone has any doubt about this, please invite Mary Rodwell. She'd be perfect for this group to talk. And in that group, when she comes to talk, tell her about our first communication with that email, and she would tell you the same thing. So we spoke until about 1:30 in the morning, my time, which is 1:30 in the afternoon, her time. And I said, look, Mary, it's 1:30 a.m. here. I got to go to work tomorrow. And she's, oh, sorry about that. We'll continue our discussions. So the very next day at 9:30 in the morning, I get a telephone call. Hello, is this Ray Hernandez? I said, yes, who's this? Dr. Rudy Shields. I said, who? Well, Rudy Shields is a retired professor of astrophysics at Harvard University. I mean, you can't get more mind-blowing than a professor of astrophysics from Harvard. He had corrected that man that was in the wheelchair that was paralyzed, Hawking, Stephen Hawking. He had corrected Hawking's on his theory of black holes. He said, it's not anything like you described in your papers. It's something totally different. And he wrote a whole series of papers saying what really is a black hole, how it operates. And then years later, Hawking came about and said, look, I was wrong all those years on black holes, but he never credited Dr. Rudy Shields. Okay, and Rudy was not one of these famous people like Stephen Hawking. Okay, so no one paid attention to his work, even though he had been at Harvard for 45 years. So anyway, he had been a dear friend of the late Dr. John Mack, who was a professor at the Harvard School of Medicine. And he had wrote a book about aliens, UFOs and aliens. And then Harvard tried to terminate him as a tenured professor. And Rudy was one of the first, probably the only academic that came out to support him, because Dr. John Mack asked Rudy, and Rudy, I'm getting all these comments from people that were brought to other dimensions, other realities. Is this possible? And Rudy says, yes. Modern physics is now arriving at the conclusion that there's such a thing as other dimensions, as other realities. So that's how they became close friends. And Rudy still was interested in these topics. So he's calling me. And he said, Ray, you know what you got was a download of Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness. Because I was there about a half an hour trying to explain to him what had happened to me. And then he said, write this telephone number. And so I wrote it down. I said, whose number is this? This is the telephone number of my mentor. So in my mind, I was saying, who in the hell can be this guy's mentor? He's a Harvard professor of astrophysics for 45 years. So who's your mentor? He goes, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Okay. Not only was Edgar was the sixth man to walk on the moon, Apollo 14 astronaut, he was also the founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is now the premier institute on the psi phenomenon and consciousness. And so I called Edgar much later in the afternoon because, quite frankly, I was scared about calling this man because he's very, very famous. And so he says, oh, I just got off the phone with Rudy. He says, you're someone that I need to know about. Okay. He says, what are you doing tomorrow at 10 o'clock? I said, well, I'm going to work. He said, well, can you take the day off and come by my house? So he lives 90 minutes away. So at 10 o'clock, I was at the home of Edgar Mitchell. And first of numerous times, I was at his home. And there he told me tons about himself. Like the first 4 or 5 hours, it was all about his life. Okay, growing up in rural Roswell. That mean Roswell is famous? Well, he was there when that UFO supposedly crashed. Okay? And he was telling me tons of stories of how he was invited to go to NASA, how he got a PhD at MIT. You know, Ed was a brilliant, brilliant person. But when I left his house, I thought he was a nut job. Okay, because I asked him, I said, Edgar, I have no idea what my experience was. I don't know what it means. He goes, don't worry, Ray. You'll find out. They will let you know. That was his words. They will let you know. And he says, and that's how these experiences work. And he says, you have to implement what you were told. Okay? And Rudy calls it cosmic intelligence. What cosmic intelligence told you. So when I left his house, I said, these two old men were crazy as you know what, right? I want nothing to do with them. And so what happened was that Friday night, when I woke up Saturday, I had a whole outline of what I'm going to be doing, okay? And let me tell you very briefly. I eventually wrote 6 pages, and I sent it off to Mary Rodwell, Edgar Mitchell, and Rudy Shields. And that is, what I was told was that all of the paranormal contact experiences, all of the paranormal, is all one phenomenon. There's no separation, okay? And the reason why is because all of them involve a manipulation of space-time. And by manipulation of space-time, demonstrate that consciousness is fundamental, not a perceived physical reality. However, when you look at each of these different arenas, you'll see with NDEs, there was tons of data on NDEs, okay? Dr. Bruce Grayson had been writing about NDEs for 40 years. Dr. Kenneth Ring, the same thing. These are the two co-founders of IONS, okay? Academic research for over 40 years. Dr. Jeffrey Long, who happens to be one of the 6 co-editors of my 6-volume book, A Greater Reality. Jeffrey Long had been researching NDEs for 30 years. Okay, he had published several books. Oh, there's the book, Greater Reality, and it lists the 6 co-editors. One of these, Dr. Jeffrey Long. So, and numerous other authors I could state. So with NDEs, there is the name of the authors there. I can go. Thank you, Ron. I could talk about the authors later on. So then, I said, since all of this different paranormal phenomenon is all interrelated, with NDEs, we got a boatload of information. With OBEs, there was the Robert Monroe Institute. And subsequent to that, numerous other people have published papers on it, etc. With remote viewing, the Stanford Research Institute launched their whole academic research on remote viewing in the early 1970s. With the whole phenomenon of ghosts and spirits. First of all, that's been talked about since the dawn of mankind. But for example, William James, the father of modern psychology, he dedicated the last 20 years of his life to the whole aspect of mediumship, spirit communication, communicating with the deceased. And tons of other writers have written about the phenomenon of communication with the deceased. And hallucinogenic journeys in the 1950s with LSD. LSD, you could easily study LSD, okay? And then it stopped since I think it was the late 60s, I think it was, LSD research until recently. Now there's huge boom about academic research on hallucinogens for medical purposes, for mental health problems. But when it came to UFOs, there was zero Zippo on academic research of individuals that have had contact experiences with non-human intelligence, okay? Because the UFO field, materialist ufologists, what they would do, whenever they got these reports, people like, for example, the MUFON organization, or even all the predecessors of MUFON, CUFOS was another organization. And then there was another one, I forgot the name of it, but since the early 60s, all these organizations were taught to basically throw out all contact experiences that involve the paranormal and to throw out all contact experiences that involve communication with non-human beings, okay? So that's why there's this disdain in materialist ufology about this field. There was nothing published. So I said, what we're going to be doing is we need to acquire data of the UFO contact phenomena. And then once we get that data, we can then compare it to NDEs, OBEs, astro-travel, remote viewing, et cetera, hallucinogenic journeys, the psi phenomenon, to see what are the interrelationships, the commonalities. So then I wrote this 6-page single-space document because I did go to Berkeley for a PhD. I taught at universities for several years. So I have that academic background. And so I sent it to these 3 individuals, and they were like, oh my God, Ray, this is brilliant. We need to do this. So I said, okay, we've got 4 people here. Would you be willing to work together on this? And they all said yes. So then we started what came to be known as the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. We then brought in about 10 additional PhD academics and these top-of-the-line UFO researchers, contact researchers, people like Mary Rodwell, Kathleen Martin, Barbara Lamb, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Rosemary Ellen Guiley. These are all in the UFO field, contact fields, very, very well-known people. So we brought these people that had their boots on the ground working with UFO contact experiences with all these PhD academics. And these are neuroscientists, these were astrophysicists, these are psychologists, these are psychiatrists, all diverse fields working together as a team. And then after we developed 3 surveys, two quantitative and one qualitative instrument. And it took you a long time to do these resurveys if you participated in it. But the data that we received, it took us 9 months to write it up. And we published an academic journal in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, which is a major journal that has published some academic NDE literature, but together with literature of Dr. Gene Raven, Dr. Jacques Vallée. These are very well-known and reputable people. And so we published in that academic journal. It was myself, Dr. Rudy Shield, Dr. Bob Davis, who's retired professor of neuroscience, and Dr. Russell Scalpone, a PhD statistician. So it was 4 authors to that paper. And then we published a book in 2018 titled Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And the co-authors were myself, Dr. Rudy Shields, and Dr. John Klimo, a professor of psychology for over 40 years. Right there's the book, Beyond UFOs. Thank you, Rod. And so that book was historic from my perspective because nothing exists like it. Because materialist ufology, once they saw that word consciousness in our book, it was totally ignored. I was not invited to any of these major UFO conferences. It was never discussed in these UFO shows because it wasn't about flying saucers. It wasn't about a physical gray being. It wasn't about crashes. It wasn't about whistleblower case. It wasn't about disclosure. That's all the stuff that's being talked about today. I say that those people that are focusing on that, they're totally clueless about the field of UFO contact experiences. Now, our research study totally contradicts what is circulating in ufology. I'll be very, very brief on it. It's a 820-page book, but I'll be very, very brief. One is that these experiences, while initially 37% viewed them as highly negative, initially, over time, these individuals began to have additional contact experiences. And the more experiences they had, the more positive they became, or their perspective of the experience. In the very beginning, they were frightened to death. Why? You see this, reptilian being right in front of you, breathing down on top of you, by the time you've had 20 of these experiences, you'll see that this is like an angel, that it doesn't mean any harm to you. But that first time, or if you only had 1 or 2 experiences, you're not going to change. These are horrifying experiences. So that's what we discovered, that eventually only 5% viewed them as negative. Okay. And that's the word, ontological shock, Ron. That's the word of Dr. John Mack. And we borrowed that term for our book, Beyond UFOs. We also learned that these experiences were highly positive. That was one of the major findings. And we asked that question in more than 20 different ways. For example, one question was, if you could stop your UFO contact experiences, would you? Well, I think that the number was 85% said no. Keep it coming, keep it coming. So if this is such a horrible and evil thing, why did 85% said keep it coming, Another experience is that these were primarily paranormal experiences. Yes, you might have seen 1 or 2 UFOs or many of them. Yes, you might have seen 1 or 2 physical beings that associated with the UFO contact phenomenon. And by the way, the number 1 type of being seen were the energy beings. And what is one of the major types of beings seen in an NDE? An energy being. The number 2 type of being seen in our survey in UFO contact experiences was the human-looking being. Well, guess what people see in NDEs? Probably most of the time, a human-looking being. Now, these human-looking beings, the vast majority of them were discussed in white robes. Well, guess what? In an NDE, what are these people seeing? Human-looking beings in white robes. So this is the beginning now of comparing UFO contact with the NDE phenomena. And there are literally hundreds of these matching points, okay? So what we discovered was that the UFO contact phenomenon involve paranormal experiences the vast majority of the time. Yes, you've had just like NDEs, a lot of people have NDEs, later on have paranormal experiences, okay? Or even before their NDE, they had paranormal experiences. So you hear that all the time in the NDE field. So with the UFO contact phenomenon, same thing. Some people had paranormal experiences before they saw the UFO. But for the vast majority of people was, like in my case, you've seen a UFO, then all these paranormal experiences would begin. And so it was like 95% of their experiences were paranormal. The part of the UFO and the physical UFO being was like 5%. So it was totally different from what materialist ufology thinks it is. Okay. Then another thing is the spiritually transformative experiences, just like NDEs, another commonality. Okay. 85% of these people have had UFO contact experiences were totally and completely spiritually transformed, like in my case. Okay. And for many, many different ways, just like an NDE, they're all different, these NDEs, all different, but there's similar patterns. Same thing with the UFO contact experiences. They're all completely different, but you have similar patterns and similar outcomes. One is that we ask these people, how were you in terms of religion or your spiritual point of view? 85% had this complete transformation towards spirituality. Their views of religion decreased substantially. The atheist all of a sudden is not an atheist anymore. Okay. And so people became highly spiritual from this phenomenon. And then other findings were that the UFO phenomenon involved a manipulation of space-time. Like, for example, in my case, where I was taken out of my body, manipulation of space-time. My wife was here, she was gone for an hour. Where was she? Manipulation of space-time. You see a UFO, and right before your eyes, it totally disappears. Manipulation of space and time. Okay? So the UFO phenomenon was totally filled with manipulation of space-time. Well, what is an NDE? You get brought to another dimension. That's clearly a manipulation of space-time. Like my father, he was up there for 20, 30 years. Manipulation of space and time. Okay. Same thing with out-of-body experiences. Astro-travel experiences. Ayahuasca. LSD, psilocybin. They all involve in manipulation of space-time. So that's another thing that we learned from doing this UFO research study. And there are literally hundreds of other findings. You can go to that book, which is now free, and I'll give you the website of where you can go to get that book for free as a PDF file, Beyond UFOs. So here I began to get invited. This was in 2018. So in 2018, 2019, I was invited to a few smaller conferences, not any of the major UFO conferences. The NDE folks totally ignored me because what I was doing was UFO stuff. It wasn't NDE related stuff, even though they had all these similarities between both of them, okay? The people that were into all the other paranormal fields totally ignored me because I wasn't doing psi phenomenon. I wasn't doing out-of-body experience. The consciousness researchers, well, yeah, I was doing some aspect of consciousness research, but not what is perceived to be, academic consciousness research. So people began to see my work and the work of the other professors as pure ufology. But yet that was never our intention. Our intention was to find out the commonalities of all the contact modalities, but we needed the data on the UFO phenomenon first. Well, what we did is after Dr. Edgar Mitchell passed away in 2016, myself and several other academic professors from the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation formed this new organization that would take the focus away from UFOs and focus it on consciousness research. And that's CCRI, the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Okay. And so we then invited only PhD academics and people that focus on consciousness research into the organization. And we started having a series of quarterly meetings, starting in 2018. Okay. By 2020, we developed a research proposal, and it was with contributions from 15 professors. There were many, many others that participated, but they just didn't want to write up, their research proposal. And we put it all on the website that we had, and it's in our current website now. Maybe I'll just tell you right now, it's called, if someone could type it up, it's called agreaterreality.com. agreaterreality.com, all one word. Okay. And so what I did is sort of like I could type it in. Let me see. Give me a second and I'll type it in.
I got it, Ray.
Okay, thank you. And so what I did is I wrote a very short book in very plain and simple language. Only 200 pages, because I wanted people to read it. And I made the PDF files back in 2020 available for free. And it's titled The Mind of God, a Spiritual Virtual Reality Model of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities. So it's called The Mind of God, a Spiritual Virtual Reality Model of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities. And that book is going to be available for free. And the date is in 2 weeks, by April 1st. All of my books are going to be available free. We're just waiting for a webmaster to load them up, and he's taking forever to do it. So that book is in very, very simple language. So a fifth grader can understand it easily. It's a theoretical proposal of how consciousness works. And it heavily relies on near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, astral travel experiences, on UFO contact experiences. And it discusses that, yeah, that's it. Oh my God, Ron, you've got the full works. And what it discusses is that when we die, okay, our body leaves the fourth dimension. And by the fourth dimension, we have the three dimensions of coordinate geometry, okay? And then the fourth one is space-time. So in the reality we're living now is 4 dimensions. And then we have an out-of-body experience, our individuated unit of consciousness. And that's the term that I borrowed from Tom Campbell, who was the major out-of-body experiencer and astral travel experiencer in the world. He was the main researcher for Robert Monroe. He was the main culprit there that gave Robert Monroe most of his ideas at the Robert Monroe Institute. And he wrote a paper in volume 1 of our Greater Reality book series, because he wrote a book of 700 pages titled My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything. And I said, look, Tom, no one's going to read 700 pages. Okay. Can you get this thing shortened to me 20 to 25 pages, and I'll put it in this book. And that book had articles by Raymond Moody, had books by Jeffrey Long, had articles by Dr. Bruce, the NDE started ions, NDE researcher, Bruce, oh my goodness, I'm having a mental breakdown. Anyway, I'll give you the
Bruce Grayson.
Bruce Grayson, yes, thank you so much. And so it's got a who's who. Jeffrey Mitchell, it's got Jeffrey Kreipel from the University of Texas at Rice University, and tons of Eben Alexander, tons of brilliant minds wrote chapters for volume 1 and 2 of A Greater Reality. And so what I wanted to do is, instead of something that was full-blown academic, like volumes 1 and 2, I want to write like a general introduction that talked about the hierarchies of these dimensions. Now, if you're having an astral travel experience, like I spoke about before, if you're having an OBE, you pop out of your body, you're interacting with your physical reality. You're interacting with your room. You want to see if your daughter's fine, you go next door to her room. You want to see how your mother-in-law is doing, you pop across the street to your mother-in-law's home. If you want to go to Alaska, you know, boom, you go out there, but you're still dealing with your physical plane. Okay. Now, astral travel experience, as I mentioned earlier, you're piercing that veil of that fifth reality, and you're going into these. We still don't know how many different astral planes there are in an astral travel experience. We think it's, you know, it's more than one. So in that astral travel experience, it's like an NDE. You're having anything you could think of in an NDE, except you're not dead, you know, your body is still alive. It's your consciousness has popped out like an out-of-body experience. And then you're able to go back, okay, via these different astral planes back to your physical body. Now, when you die, you have a near-death experience. We all are familiar with that. You go the same astral planes, you're going up this hierarchy. And then you're going into pretty much the highest astral plane, which is the NDE. And there you're interacting with the mind of God. And the way I explained it is that when you die, your individuated unit of consciousness goes back to the mind of God. And the way to think about it is the brain has billions of neurons, okay? And we are, our individuated unit of consciousness are one of these neurons. We go back and we join back God. We join the mind of God. And a lot of people that are NDE experiencers, that are astral travel experiences, that are UFO contact experiences, experiences of the contact modalities. And I think I defined that earlier, all the different ways that humans are piercing the veil of our physical reality and having contact with non-human intelligence. So almost all of these individuals describe that they've melted with the mind of God. And all of a sudden, they knew everything. A lot of people have NDEs. While they're up there, I knew everything, okay? There's not one question that I didn't know about. NDE experiencers say that, together with astral travel experiencers, with UFO contact experiencers, with experiences of psychedelic journeys. I knew everything. And all of a sudden, I was brought back down to this reality, and I forgot everything. But yet, when I was up there, I knew that I knew everything, you know? And some people get glimpses, they have memories of what they were told. And so one way of explaining it is that when we die, we join God. And God is just a big, you can think of it like a virtual reality, a memory bank. It's an information storage device. And that runs into a lot of the theory of Dr. Edgar Mitchell. He says that we live in a quantum hologram reality. And we retrieve information from the Akashic records, from a central depository. And that is actually the mind of God. It's an information repository. So we then join that information repository of pure information. So that's why we get to know everything, okay, once we're there. And that's why a lot of people return from their experiences, they have psychic abilities. Why? Because you already were attached to the mind of God. And all of a sudden, you're much more, your abilities of psychic abilities are much more strengthened, because you already had what is called non-local consciousness. Is the theory of how our minds are able to tap into the Akashic records of the mind of God. And then we're able to get information about the future, about the past, about so-called past lives, even though it's not past, because there's no present, past, and future. It's all simultaneously. But we're able to tap into that information storage depository. And so I discussed all of that in the book, The Mind of God. And so then what I did is I got all these academic professors. And earlier, for years, I've been communicating with these people. And I would ask them a couple of fundamental questions. Do you believe that consciousness is fundamental and not our perceived physical reality? Okay, that our physical reality is a temporary illusion. Okay, all of them said, yes, of course. Raymond Moody, Bruce Grayson, all the NDE folks, all of them. yes, consciousness is fundamental. Certain ufologists that are consciousness-based ufologists said yes, okay? Same thing with Robert Monroe, Tom Campbell, all the people understand that consciousness is fundamental. Then I would ask them, do you also hypothesize that all of the contact modalities are interrelated, that they need to be studied as one interrelated phenomenon? And they said yes. I said, okay, let me see the book. Let me see the article. No one ever wrote about it. Okay, it doesn't exist, but yet they know about that. And let me give you a hypothetical situation. Okay, not hypothetical, an actual situation. Dr. Dean Radin, who's the lead scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and he's published 4 books on the psi phenomenon and consciousness. A brilliant theoretician, academic. Okay, he answered yes to both questions, and I said, "Well, how come you haven't written that?" He says, "Ray, I got my hands full just with the psi phenomenon, and now you're telling me to put all the pieces together." He says, "We're barely able to run the Institute of Noetic Sciences with our limited funding. You're asking the way big picture, and I'm not ready for that, you know." The same thing with all these people. Raymond Roy. Oh, Ray, well, I just focus on philosophy and the philosophy of the mind books. And he would go into the different Greek philosophers and their theories. And he says, this whole big picture together, they were discussing that. So I would tell people to go back to ancient Greek philosophy, that's already been done that, So he didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Same thing with all of these authors, I'm very busy doing the NDE research. This was Jeffrey Long, Jeffrey Mishloff, I just haven't gotten around to that. That's like a huge monstrous task, even though he did write a book titled The Roots of Consciousness, Dr. Jeffrey Mitchell. So on and on, all these people said, we agree with you, but no one's ever done it. Right? So then what I did is I got all of these brilliant minds. I said, and I wrote up the sections of the contact modalities. For example, what is consciousness? And that's where Dr. Bruce Grayson came in, okay? Raymond Moody wrote an article for that section. What is consciousness? Then another part was, is consciousness fundamental? We had articles on that. We had an article on Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness and non-local consciousness. And these are theoretical articles on those 2 concepts. And then we had a separate topic on near-death experiences and the survival of consciousness. We had about 5 or 6 academic articles on that. For UFOs, we had 13 articles talking about how NDEs might be a consciousness-based phenomenon, okay? And out-of-body experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we published then volumes 1 and 2, which were written by PhD academics and medical doctors, focusing on the theoretical aspects of it, of the relationship between consciousness and the contact modalities or the paranormal. And then for volumes 3, 4, and 5, and in about 4 months, volume 6, we published articles that are written by experiencers of the contact modalities. People like such yourselves that have had these experiences. So they wrote about the history of their experiences and how it changed them, what they learned from it. So we each book, each of the 6 volumes has 800 pages. These are huge, monstrous books. And then finally, I just finished writing a book about my own personal experiences titled A Greater Reality, One Man's Journey of Discovery. And that has filled with both my personal experiences and my theories and hypotheses of what I learned about consciousness. And then we're also finishing up a documentary. We've been working on this for 7 years. And the documentary is filled with all these academics together with over 100 experiencers. And we mix them both together. The medical doctors, the PhD academics with the experiencers. And so it's academic in nature. And we're focusing, again, on the relationship between consciousness and the paranormal contact modalities. And that'll be coming out this year, maybe in early fall.
So Ray, I noticed on the trailer to your documentary that you have Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell,
Yes, she was interviewed.
the telepathy tapes.
Yes.
Could you say a word about that?
Oh, I mean, she's absolutely brilliant, together with all these other individuals. There's not one person that's more brilliant than anyone else.
Right.
She had her office right next to Dr. John Mack.
Mm.
She was an undergraduate at Harvard. She did her medical internship at Johns Hopkins. She did her residency in neuroscience at Harvard University. And
So
she was, yeah.
So would you say that the telepathy that is practiced by the non-speakers is similar to what you're studying, to these other phenomena?
Yes, because let's talk about telepathy for a minute. Dr. Dean Radin is sort of like the champion of academic research of this psi phenomenon. Telepathy is one component of psi. What she did is she actually demonstrated via these interviews how these autistic children were able to randomly know what's going to be thrown out beforehand. And were able to do, unlike these savant children, these automatic calculations, they were doing this on information that they had never seen before come up. So they knew what was going to be thrown out beforehand. But yet J.B. Ryan was finding that the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, had all these massive research findings, very similar on telepathy, but not with these autistic children. With them, it took an additional extreme position, because these kids were able to know things that was impossible was going to take place. With all these other people at these other institutes, it was all random chance. And they just scored statistically much higher than the expected average mean.
So I'm going to open it up to questions, if you don't mind. I'm going to put us back on gallery view so everybody can see everybody. And if somebody has a question, you can raise your hand either electronically or just raise your hand if you'd like to ask Ray a question. And
one thing I want to state is that our website, which is posted there in the chat room, agreaterreality.com, that's got 2 R's. All of my 9 books are going to be posted for free as downloadable PDF files from thegreaterreality.com. And so I recommend that everyone start with my personal book of my personal experiences, because, there's the Jack Russell Terrier. My God, Rod, we have a lot in common here. And our dog that was paralyzed, that was had a miraculous medical healing, was a Jack Russell Terrier. And so, yes, all our books are free. Just be patient for 2 more weeks.
I see John has a question. Oh, you're muted. It doesn't sound like you're muted, but I don't hear you.
Dottie, how do we raise our hand?
Oh, there's a little down at the bottom. There's a, let's see, where is it? There's a, let's see. Somebody tell her how to raise the hand.
You click on react, and then you'll see that one of the options is raise hand.
Oh, react. There it is. It's a little heart.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And one of the options is raise your hand. Thank you. John?
Okay.
Can anybody hear John?
Yeah, no, he's muted.
It doesn't show that he's muted, but we can't hear him. So let's go to Ron, and while you figure out what's wrong with your system there. Oh, put it in the chat and put the question in the chat and I'll ask it. And while you're doing that, we'll let Ron ask his question.
Sorry, John. Ray.
Put it in the chat, John.
Ray, one of the things, since I've been paying attention to the telepathy tapes and reading Diane Hennessy's book, and kudos on having her in your documentary, by the way, I've often thought that one of the challenges humanity has, is specific to language and words. And words mean different things to different people. And you can say the same word, say the color red, and what one person sees in their mind's eye is different than what another person sees in their mind's eye. So one of the things that I thought about the telepathy tapes and this being part of these phenomena, because that's part of ESP and psi, telepathy is, what a wonderful thing for humanity to learn that we are capable of these kinds of things. And if I thought that if you have been so instructed and affected by a greater intelligence to do all this amazing work you've done, I would hope that this greater entity, some people call it God, some people call it all kinds of words, is helping us lead us to a point where we evolve and we can better understand each other with clarity. What do you think about that, Ray?
I have mixed feelings about that. I know personally for myself, there's no coincidences in my experiences. They were all orchestrated events. If you read my book about my personal experiences, you will clearly understand that, because I give numerous examples of the orchestration of my events. I happen to believe that all of our lives are orchestrated, because when we get brought into this physical plane, we have certain missions that we need to accomplish in our lifetimes. And if you happen to die beforehand, you're told, no, you need to go back because you need to finish it. Okay, you need to finish what you set out to do. So all of our lives are all orchestrated events. In terms of humanity at large, I think the mind of God does not really focus on, the destruction of humanity, the planet Earth. Yes, it's concerned about that, because people are shown by non-human intelligence via all these contact modalities that we're destroying our planet. But they also talk about that we're destroying ourselves, our minds, our souls, our spirits, by the deeds that we do. The near-death phenomenon, what that's taught us, and that is in my interactions with Raymond Moody, Dr. Jeffrey Long, Dr. Kenneth Ring. I've had numerous communications with him, and I've read all of their books, including Bruce Grayson's books. And that is, people are told, I forgot what percentage of it, but a very large percentage, when they return, it's not important what religion you are. It's not important how famous you are. It's not important, how much money you have. What is most important is that when you return, you need to learn how to love. That's it. You need to learn how to love. So I think all these, same thing with UFO contact experiences. That's like one of the most important lessons that they told us via non-human intelligence, UFO-related non-human intelligence. Because remember, it's all interrelated. These people are having out-of-body experiences. They're having astro-travel experiences. They're having UFO communication, telepathy. They're hearing these voices coming into them, okay? So it's not like they're having one thing. It's like the whole cornucopia of experiences they're having. And one of these major lessons is that you need to learn how to love. If not, you're going to be destroying this planet, because you're also destroying you as a spirit. Okay, what you are here to learn. You're here how to learn how to love. So you're not accomplishing that task. Okay, so I think that they're not concerned as much with the physicality of the world as much as we think that they should be. I think what it's doing is that us as souls, the mind of God, they're disappointed because we're not implemented the love for each other. So that's what I think is going on.
So we have about, we're actually at 9 o'clock just about, but do you mind just staying over for a couple more?
Yes, please.
Answer a couple of quick questions.
If you don't mind, let me have some coffee here.
Yes, please do. So Barb, you're next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Oh, hi, Ray. Is it possible you can post your phone number or your email contact? I have a very important message for you.
Okay, let me write it down here. I'll give you my personal email instead of the organizational email.
But do you have a phone number?
It's in Colombia.
Okay.
I would prefer people to send me an email and we could set up a time
Okay.
to chat via Zoom.
Yeah, can you put it on there, please?
Yeah. I have here my personal email. And tell me that, you know, you want to chat with me, you have some information to tell me, and we can set up a Zoom call.
Okay, great. I'll contact you, Ray. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Did you put it in
Can
your,
you put it on there again? I missed it.
Oh, I just put it in the chat room.
yeah,
Right now, do you see
How,
it?
how do I contact that? How do I get there?
the chat?
Well, I could write it out for you, spell it for you.
If you put your cursor at the bottom of your screen,
Yeah.
then everything will appear and you'll see chat. And click on that, and then you'll see all the stuff that was saved in the chat.
Okay.
And then at the top, you'll have 3 little dots, and you can click on that and drag to save chat, and you'll have it. It'll show up in a folder called Zoom.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Janine?
Okay. Ray, thank you so much. I had an emergency phone call, so I missed. I hope I'm going to get to see this, aren't I? There's going to be
Right.
that'll be wonderful. I wanted to ask you, I have memories from a lifetime in Lemuria, and I was wondering if you see any connection between Lemuria and some of the intergalactic family connections that you're aware of.
Well, reincarnation was studied by the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. Dr. Ian Stevenson documented, I think it was thousands of cases. I forgot the exact number, and he's since passed away. And Jim Tucker, professor who he hired many years ago, continued with his research on reincarnation. And I've listened to a lot of their interviews and a lot of their stories, and it's just truly unbelievable. The documented reincarnation stories. With NDE experiencers, there's a whole boatload. The problem is that no one has ever really gone full depth to study the relationship between NDEs and reincarnation. It's mentioned that experiencers have that, but we don't know the stories. We don't know what they've told us. So there's so much work that needs to be done academically in this arena. UFO contact experiencers get information about their past lives through the intelligence that they're interacting with. Okay, either out of body experiences, astral travel experiences, in their living room. For example, let me give you a little story. Won't take too long. My best friend is one of the world's major contact experiencers. He's had NDEs. He's had astral travel experiences, out of body experiences. He's never taken any ayahuasca or magic mushrooms or anything like that, but he's had everything. Tons of experiences. One experience was he was on his living room watching TV, and then this being, and it was an Asian-looking being, very heavy set, with like ancient Chinese wardrobe. Okay, communicated with Alberto telepathically, and he says, Alberto, I was your adopted father in a past life. We had numerous battles together, told him his name. And he said, get a piece of paper, write it down phonetically. This is my name, okay? And this is your name. And I was a warlord of a huge area of China. And he discussed the name back in ancient times. And then told him a lot of, their joint experiences. And then all of a sudden, after like a minute, the being disappeared. And Alberto, he's had tons of these experiences, and he messed it up. Okay, another crazy experience, This was about past lives. Well, the next day, this sword, this huge, heavy sword appeared to him.
Mm.
His wife was scared to death to go near that sword. She took Polaroid pictures of the sword. Now, you cannot fake a Polaroid picture, okay? Alberto was holding a Polaroid, they had the sword like this, and then they had another picture of a sword on the wall, right? Well, that sword had 21 notches,
Oh, wow.
and the emperor told Alberto that he had 21 kills with
Oh,
that sword, okay? And so that sword hung around the entire day. They put it on the corner of their living room, right, for the night when they went to sleep. Well, guess what? The next day, that sword was not there. So Alberto takes this as a teaching of reincarnation. That's how he took this to be, because he's had tons of these teachings, spiritual teachings. He was brought up to visit the mind of God several times, and he's not Christian, yet he's seen the Virgin Mary like one time in his bed. It wasn't being astro-travel or the body sprays. No, she was right there. She had like a crooked nose, right? She had a little tiny nose, and she is carrying a white bouquet of flowers, of roses. And then Jesus Christ, he's seen him 3 times, but he says, Ray, I'm not Christian, you know? And and he was brought up to see, quote unquote, God, cosmic consciousness, whatever you want to call it, as an energy being, huge energy being, like 3 different times, where he communicated with him. So most of the time is when he's on his living room couch watching TV, you know, crazy stuff. And so that's my take about reincarnation, that outside of the academic work of Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker, we know very little of it because no one ever reads those books, because those are huge, gigantic books. No one reads their academic papers either. So it's a field that, yes, I've heard about it from experiencers, but we need to learn much more.
Mm. Well, I have like about snippets of 22 different lifetimes that I remember, and I've also
Mhm.
had flashbacks, but they started after my husband died. And it was, you know, how they say one grief brings back the other unresolved griefs. And that's what it was like, oh, I have to resolve this. 5 of them were from that. But yeah, thank you. That's very interesting to hear that. And I do want to say, I don't know where in Colombia Emilio Ortiz is, but I think you two would have an amazing time. And I would love to see you on his podcast, Just Tap In. And
Let me write this down. Emilio Ortiz.
yeah, Emilio
Yeah.
Ortiz. And his podcast, Just Tap In. And
That's the name of it? Just tap in?
that's Just Tap In. So if you just put in those words and YouTube, it'll pop up. And the headings, guys, the headings are like I don't know, sensationalized, but they don't represent the way he communicates at all. And
Okay.
I just think he'd love to have you on his podcast.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Janine. Susan, you're the last question.
Yes, I think that I'm not muted.
No, you're good.
So Ray, you said something about us being like little neurons in the body of God, something like that, and that when we die, when we in our physical form perish, we just get recycled. It's like we leave conscious our conscious awareness of our lives in these bodies on planet Earth in this time, goes through a process of reintroduction to our original plan. to our original job, our duty to our soul development. And so we're born again. But I just want to say that I think it's all simultaneously.
Yes, yes.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is. Everything's
Yeah, it's
so,
like I said before, there's no past, no present, no future.
right. And so you can, it's like where we place the awareness of our consciousness. That is what we experience. Your friend, Fernando, or whatever his name
Yeah,
was,
Alberto, yes.
Alberto, he was just able to change his focal energy to different times or places, different lives, and have that experience. But I think the imagination is also involved in that, because you know, that when I hear people talking like I saw the Virgin Mary, you know, then I think, okay, I don't, that's, you know, I saw Mickey Mouse, whatever. It just seems like when people try to claim that they have been visited or visited famous people or famous, yes, particularly famous people out of history or prehistory,
So
it
Susan,
loses its verisimilitude to me. But I do want to ask, what is an NDA, NDE, ND?
What is an NDE? It's when your individuated unit of consciousness leaves your body, usually under circumstances of bodily death or close to bodily death, and then returns back to your physical body, your individuated unit of consciousness. And those are two aspects of it. You physically have died. You've had a stroke, your heart stopped beating, whatever, you stopped breathing, you drowned, or close to. There's a lot of people that have been described as in battle. I know this man named Tony Woody, for example, who was not dead, but he was close to death or getting close to death, where he was in an airplane that was burning up, and they were landing the plane, and he went out of his body right outside the airplane, and he saw everything slow motion. The Pepsi-Cola can, he described it, is flying real slowly right next to him because he was out of body. And it was while the plane was landing, and he was scared that it was going to blow up because the plane was on fire with all the gasoline. And so you don't have to be dead. You don't have to be even close to, even people in battle. Raymond Moody had talked about individuals that have been in battle, and they were like, you know, close to dying because all these bullets were flying all around, and all of a sudden they go out of their body and they go to these other realities. So the NDE, I think all of the NDE researchers have discussed that you don't necessarily have to die, but the vast majority of documented cases are cases where physical death has occurred.
it stands for near-death experience, Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course, I
Oh,
was trying to think of that, and I could not think, what is
Yeah.
NDE? It's not a
Oh,
non-disclosure.
Oh, I misunderstood you. I thought that you knew that it was an NDE, but you
No,
wanted.
she didn't know what it
Oh,
stood
okay,
for.
okay.
So we're already at 9:13, and John, do you have a really quick question? Because it's 11 o'clock where Ray is.
Okay, I'm going to talk really quickly. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I disconnected my speakers, which seem to be screwing things up. Thank you, Ray. I think I may have talked to you once at a Phoenix UFO conference, and I see Alita is here. I was just on a Zoom with her. She was discussing many of the same similar topics, and I highly recommend Alita's Zoom if anybody wants to tune in. I talked to experiencers. I've been doing that for about a decade. I've talked to hundreds of them, and I had, oddly, which I've never heard of before, two experiencers that I contacted today that had reported being coated with some kind of film on their persons. And one guy said when he returned, he had like a rubbery sort of smell on him. The other person had photographs of this shiny, sparkly stuff that was left on her, like that was the residue of this film. I'd never heard of that before, but today I had two people I've talked to, and I said, like I said, I've talked to hundreds. Have you ever heard of such a film being deposited on people for whatever reason by the aliens?
First of all, I didn't get into that discussion yet about aliens. I don't call them aliens because I don't think that, as I said before, that these are physical beings visiting us from a physical planet. So I don't use that word aliens. I use the word non-human intelligence. And but yes, I've heard many people, and what was described to me was, I guess, the way to picture of it was like this: you get confetti, right? You chuck it, cut it up to like little teeny weeny tiny pieces, and almost like skin type of feel of it, and people wake up, or all of a sudden they feel these thousands of different film. So that's the, I guess, a word you could use, film, but it is little tiny pieces of objects that when you wake up or you're transported here or whatever, that people feel that. Now, in terms of what it might be, I think it's pure speculation of what it might be. But yes, I've heard of it. Alberto, my friend Alberto, one time told me about that experience. And he talked about being transported to another multidimensional reality. He was in the desert with Sixto Paz Wells trying to call down these UFO intelligence. And then his physical body had blanked out. He didn't know where he was. But when he returned back to the desert of Peru, he was covered with all that film. So yes.
Okay,
that is very.
I know Sixto Paz from having worked with Dr. Navarro in Brazil. I have his book. Actually, I probably should refresh myself with it, but thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ray. This was, I love hearing your stories.
Well, if you read my book, A Greater Reality, One Man's Journey of Discovery, which is the same title as my documentary, you will see tons of crazy stories that and some of them I've never discussed publicly. And I didn't discuss today because it would take a long time for people to understand it and to absorb it, which is, conversations with a non-human intelligence. That's very physical, very real. But if you open it up to such a large group like this, it'll just take forever to try to get through that. So my book is available for free for everyone. I would recommend everyone to start with that book. It's free as of April 1st, and that'll lay out the theoretical foundation for all of the other books.
Okay, great. Well, very good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and gosh, coming in from Colombia. How cool is that?
Yes.
So
yes,
if
Colombia.
you want to take your speakers off mute, you could say goodbye, and thank you to Ray.
Oh, one last thing.
Oh,
Send me an email, everyone, and I'll send you personally all of the books.
wow.
Okay, everyone send me an email. So and I have my email right there for everyone to see. So
Yeah.
send me an email and I'll send you all of my books as PDF files.
Wow.
Is
Also-
your email in the chat? Is that what you-
Yeah.
Yes, it's my first name followed by my last name at gmail.com.
I think it's
And
also in the notice and reminder that Dottie sent out. Maybe not.
I don't think the email was, no, but I will put the email in when I send out the video. but I'm not gonna tell everybody that they can get your, your,
Oh, it's free. It's free.
you want me to? Okay.
It's free. Please tell
I'll
everybody.
send it
Tell
out
the
to
whole
the whole
world.
list then.
It's
Thank you.
this knowledge is not it's not expected to be monetized. Okay, these are
Right.
gifts to our humanity. It's spreading knowledge and information, not just mine, but even people like Diane Hennessy Powell, you know, because she shares the same beliefs as I do. And as a matter of fact, I interviewed her before she was well known.
Hmm.
Okay, before now she's well known because of that show on Netflix or wherever, you know, made her famous. But well, she was introduced to me by other academics.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank-
Yeah, very good.
Bye bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dottie.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Dottie.
coming,
Yeah, thank
everybody.
you, Dottie.
Bye.